Hello and welcome to the Australian Roundtable podcast. It is Sunday the 30th of November 2014. This is episode number 8 of our weekly broadcast live at youtube.com/Australian Roundtable from 4pm Australian Eastern Standard Time every Sunday, and also archived on the same channel for later listening if you can't tune in live. I'm your host Johnno, and I'm pleased to be joined in the studio as usual by my co-panelist Ethan Nash of TOTT News. Thanks for being here.
Always a pleasure.
And we're fortunate to again have the company of the smartest guy in the room, the great man himself, Lindsay. Thank you for joining us, my friend.
Thank you. These young men are very kind to a fat-gutted, bald-headed old man.
You're all right, mate. Now, if you're new to the show, the Australian Roundtable podcast is a Brisbane-based independent news, analysis and discussion panel podcast which broadcasts live every Sunday from 4pm AEST. Episodes are available to listen to live, as I said, and also archived at the Australian YouTube live channel. I'll discuss more about the website at the end of the show. Of course, if you're listening live, you can partake in the live chat forum at the YouTube channel right now. Now, the show features an eclectic panel of presenters who come together each week to discuss recent and topical news and current affairs from Australia and around the world. The show provides an alternate perspective to that presented by the mainstream media and is aimed at listeners in Australia and abroad who are sceptical of the official narratives being pushed by the government and the mainstream media, as we all ought to be, Lindsay. Views presented by individual panellists and guests are not necessarily representative of the entire panel, and each presenter is solely responsible for his or her own comments and claims. The show aims to foster an environment of open discussion wherein panellists and guests can freely air their opinions and anecdotes, as is supposed to be the case in a liberal democracy. All important information cited during the broadcast will be linked to in the info box underneath the show on YouTube so you can verify it for yourself, which I for one recommend you do, because that is the best way to learn about what is really going on, to do your own research and to fact check for yourself. Now, episodes generally run for about 90 minutes and timestamps are provided in the info box on YouTube on the episode page, so if you want to skip to the segment that takes your fancy, you can do so if time is short, and although it is a roundtable discussion, we do keep a rough structure for each episode and generally focus on a small handful of discrete topics every week, and I'll get to today's rundown in just a moment. Whereabouts is it? Here we go. So we have a domestic segment and an international segment. In the domestic segment today, we're going to talk about a lot of things to do with the Courier Mail, which is, of course, the newspaper in our city of Brisbane here. We're going to spend some time talking about a council which has stood up to the Fluoride lobby. We're going to spend some time talking about another shooting which has taken place here in Queensland and some contrast that it provides to other things happening around the world. And we'll give some further updates on the anti-terror legislation, the so-called anti-terror legislation that's being passed through our parliament. And then into the international segment, we'll get into our big feature piece on the Swiss Gold Referendum and a general discussion about money and gold and all the rest of it. And then if we get time, we'll also discuss briefly the Japanese earthquake that took place recently and its relationship to what happened a few years ago in Fukushima, and maybe also an update on Ebola. But that's the rundown. I'm sorry you had to listen to me so much there, guys. We'll jump straight into discussing the Courier Mail. Now, Lindsay, last week you discussed how you saw a front page where the Courier Mail was saying that one of the PUP party members looks like the Hulk, but he was the big sulk.
Yes.
And I've been doing some research lately because, as you know, I'm launching my own channel very shortly. And I've been looking at the front pages of the Courier Mail. And I just want to go through a list for you guys of some of the front pages. This is a non-exhaustive list of the front pages of the Courier Mail since July. Now, again, for those who aren't aware, the Courier Mail is owned by Uncle Rupert's News Limited. It's the only daily newspaper in this city. Let me just go through a non-exhaustive list of the front pages that are usually big colour photos, just some of them since July, to do with the Palm United Party, which is, of course, a non-mainstream political party. It was started by a billionaire magnate, so I don't support them, but they're not part of the establishment. And there's clearly an agenda at play to try and take them down through the media, as has been done to other parties in the past. I'll discuss all of that more in the future, maybe in a video that I launch on my own show, but for the time being, let me just give you guys a rundown of what I've discovered during this research. July 4, Corridors of Paranoia, a big photo of Clive on the front. A few days later, Manchurian Candidate, where they dressed him up as some kind of Soviet insurgent, I don't know. A few days later, Palmageddon, a big angry Clive, eating buildings or something. On July 23, they had a short thing called Tacky Jackie's R-rated shock, like a little side bit about one of his members. They've been getting stuck into her as well. Moving on to August 12, Clive in crisis. Just a big photo of him with his hands in his head. Big troubles for Clive. The next day, Inside Club Clive. Another front page where they were alleging that he was some kind of hedonist or something. I'm not sure. A few days later, Lambo. Just a big photo of Jackie Lambie, her head superimposed on
Rambo.
On Rambo. So who's that? Sylvester Stallone? I don't know. The day after that, August 21, Thick as a Brick.
Yeah.
This is when they were standing up Glenn Lazarus for something that he was doing, I think to do with that Queensland parliamentary inquiry. So this is just from July and August so far. I'm only just warming up here. It gets better. Turn over the page. August 26, Just Don't Listen to Us. That's it. And that was superimposed over, I think it was Glenn Lazarus again. September 1, $1 million birdie. And I can't even remember what the story was to do with that. This is all just running off written notes that I've got here. But again, a big superimposed photo of Clive Palmer and something to... Oh, it was the birds that were going to cost him money to, I don't know, excavate some land or something. Yeah. I can't... It's just that was a front page.
Yeah,
again, guys, this is all front page stuff. I'm still just warming up here. The $6 billion cost of Clive. This was September 3. Supposedly he was costing the state of Queensland $6 billion. I can't remember what their claim was. Then, of course, at that point, early September, that's when the Courier Mail got into the whole national bandwagon of big terror alert, whatever. So the next few weeks are just terror, for about 6 weeks. But then once all the legislation is passed and they don't have to worry about terrorising us anymore, they get to go back to what they wanted to do, which was getting stuck into Clive. So on October 9, they had another big thing about parties, something I was basing this off some of their screenshots. I couldn't see what the actual big bold writing was, but it was something to do with Clive again, making him look bad. October 15, what a load of something again. That was pup on the front page of the newspaper. Then they had to get back into the terror thing, and then G20, so they had to get off their hobby horse. But just lately, they've got back into the Clive bashing now that G20's gone. November 6, sold a pup. And then just a couple of days ago, as you said, Lindsay, incredible sulk. Now, that is a non-exhaustive list of the front page of the newspaper of this city discussing a guy whose party won about, I think, 10%, not even, of the vote at a minor party in every sense of the word. That's the attention they're giving him. Yeah. And I thought before we get into some of our more serious topics today, I'll just give a quick rundown of all of that to try and bring some humour to the show. Because if that's not an absolute hit job, you tell me what is.
Yeah. No. Well, I found the same. I was talking before about this story about Baden Clay, the lady that was murdered, and the husband was found guilty, and it went on some time ago, and to all intents and purposes it's passed, but apparently one of the people associated with the Courier Mail have written a book. So for 4 days in a row, they've had news stories about Baden Clay and the book.
Well, you should give the background for the listeners. So, look, I don't follow that kind of news at all, but from what I understand, that was that a child had been murdered by... Was it a woman? A woman had been murdered by a man, a year or so ago? Yeah. And when the court case was taking place, I think earlier this year, they just dominated the news. Like one murder case was all over the news. I didn't pay any attention to it, but you might want to give a background just for the listeners who aren't in Brisbane. Look, I don't think there was even big news outside of Brisbane. For some reason, it was just huge news. I don't know why.
I think it was just attractive young woman with 2 little kids, and the husband had murdered her. And then the usual thing where... He's, I don't know about tears, but he seemed to be pleading for, catch the person who did it, etc. But anyway, having finalised this off and him being in prison, I thought that was almost the end of it. But now we see this, and to me it's just tacky commercialism. It's just like, all right, we'll sell some books for our mate. And we'll use this as a news thing 4 days in a row to flog some books. And to me, it was slightly amusing, but I thought, how tacky is Uncle Rupert that this should be going on? Because really, this is the newspaper of record for Brisbane. It's not...
Well, it's the only newspaper.
Yeah. And then, anyway.
If anything's getting recorded, it's a newspaper. So what you're saying is, this was a case that was, again, this actually went to court and he was found guilty ages ago.
Yeah, ages ago.
But just lately it's been popping up on the newspaper And what you're saying is you've looked into it and you've found out that one of their journalists has written a book about it.
Yeah.
Well, and there's no coincidence.
No. And not, but I think it was today's paper. It was quite a large article, you know, and I sort of like they're cranking it up as anything. So anyway, I won't go on any more about it, but I just thought this is really tacky. I mean, I laugh at the Courier Mail all the time, but you know, this is really tacky.
Well, I'd say you couldn't blame Clive Palmer if he's sitting at home going, print as much about Baden Clay as you like. Take the stress off me.
Yeah,
So
well, Palmer said in the press conference, he said he was making light of the media coverage of him all around the country, not just in, you know, our state. And he was saying, you know, the Murdoch press ran 6 different major articles about me in all across the country in one day. You know what I mean? If that's not trying to serve an agenda, then, you know, you don't know what you're talking about. Essentially is what he was saying. So
Look, I don't think I gave the background to Clive well enough for the international listeners. As most of our listeners know, we're a bit like some of the other podcasts. We're not so worried about this team versus that team because it's all the same, right? Yeah. The thing that makes Clive Palmer different is that even though he is a billionaire mining magnate, the reason he started his own party was because he fell out of favour with one of the two, you know, the two parties who are the one party. He fell out of favour with one of those branches. So he started his own party, and ever since he did, the mainstream media commercial and the state-funded propaganda, the ABC, have been involved in a complete and comprehensive hatchet job on him. Because like you said last week, Lindsay, they don't want any outside influence. It doesn't even matter if you are part of the establishment. If you've got your own party, you might be a threat to them. So they're going to try and shut it down. And it has been overt. And what I wonder is if they didn't have their so-called terror agenda to run and they didn't have the G20 thing to run, would we have just seen 3 or 4 days per week of anti-Clive stuff? I suspect we would have.
Yeah,
the only thing that saved him is the fact that they've had to run the boogeyman terror thing as part of the whole passing Stasi laws, 1933 Germany thing. Of course, the Courier Mail has to play its part in that. And the G20, which naturally is going to get attention. If it weren't for that, you know, you could just start calling it the Clive Mail Daily or something.
But they've also got stuck into Pauline Hanson again. She's apparently talking about running, and they've done another hit job on her.
Yeah, well, and what we'll have to do is in a future show talk about how in Australia we like to think, and we're taught that we have a democracy, but of course, the one time that someone came along with nationalistic ideals, a lady named Pauline Hanson, won an incredible amount of support, something like 2/3 of the vote in her electorate, which the major parties that they can only dream of for the most part. That's what she won. So what happened? Our then health minister, and we're talking late 90s, early 2000s here, our then health minister, in consort with News Limited, set up what they called the Australians for Honest Politics Fund or something like this, just the Orwellian doublespeak. They used that money to have investigations and charges brought against her. In the end, she was in prison for a few months. Later acquitted. She'd done nothing wrong. She was a political prisoner, ruined her entire political career. And since then, no one has dared speak in nationalistic terms in this country because they know exactly what would happen to them. Apparently, she's thinking of making a comeback. And, once they're done destroying Clive, they'll move back onto her. If she gets any traction whatsoever. And I guess the central point that I'm trying to make here before we get back to discussing the Courier Mail there, Lindsay, is that in Australia, just like in other countries that some of our listeners are from, our political system is completely co-opted. And because our media is so concentrated here, you've got the ABC, which is a state-funded propaganda arm, and then you've got News Corp, which makes up 60 or 70% of newspaper readership. What do you have beyond that? Not very much. And as I'll discuss when we get to the international segment, even the group that isn't owned by Murdoch, they're just as bad. So you see, so people have no choice here. They've got no idea what's going on. And, our votes don't matter because there's so many people voting different ways to us, and they're voting the way the TV tells them because that's what they do. Like that. But enough from me. The listeners are getting entitled to me. Now, Lindsay, I know you wanted to also discuss not just the Baden Clay thing, but another thing from the Courier Mail to do with a letter to the editor that you saw.
Yes. And I don't know how this slipped through, but in today's, there's a magazine that comes with the Sunday Courier Mail, or the Sunday Mail, whatever they call it. And there was a letter to the editor there, and I don't know how it got through, but it slipped through, and it was about the International Men and Boys Day on the 19th of November. And my first thing was, has anybody listening to this heard of that? Anywhere in the world? Have you heard about there's such a thing? I know we have Women's Day and Children's Day and all these others, but has anybody heard of a Men and Boys Day? It's supposed to be on the 19th of November. Anyway, I'll let you... Have you heard of it?
No, I haven't heard of it. And as
So you're saying that someone wrote a letter to the editor saying, has anyone heard of this?
Yeah. No, well, he wasn't saying has
Do
anybody...
you have the letter to the editor in front of you?
Um,
I just want to check if it says written by Lindsay.
No, I haven't. No, because my mother was still reading the article, so I couldn't tear it out. So. No. It was some men's group, but it wasn't me. I can assure you it wasn't me.
They raise a good point, and it goes back to what we've talked about the last couple of weeks, you know what I mean? And that just adds, more evidence to the fire, that, International Women's Day is accentuated all across the country, and there's lots of rallies and it's lots of support, but then when it comes to this, barely anyone have heard of it. I haven't heard of it, why is that? And you got to keep asking why. Yeah. No, definitely interesting.
Yeah, and for listeners who are new to the show, a couple of weeks ago, at the conclusion of G20, we noticed on the communique, the things that they decide at G20, what are they going to try and achieve, these 20 powerful, nations or groups. And one of them was to reduce the gap between men and women in the workforce by 25%, which led to us having just an open discussion about gender equality, feminism versus masculinism, the attempts to get women into the workforce and the consequences that has on families and society. And next thing you know, we spent 30 minutes talking about that topic. Then last week we spent a bit more time going into these topics because I know this is very close to your heart. Lindsay is a father of 3 daughters. Two daughters.
Yeah.
And just a man who has seen what's happened to society as women who once upon a time were encouraged to be good mums and now encouraged to go and earn money. Of course, if you're earning money, someone's taking tax. If you're making money, someone's making more money off you. So people have a certain vested interest in convincing families that there should be 2 people working. But who's looking out for the kids? You know what I mean? It's that simple. Yeah. And then people will accuse me of being misogynistic or something. And I'm saying, on the contrary, if you have a family and the man wants to stay home and look after the kids, I'm totally sweet with that. I think someone should be at home looking after the kids. And can someone explain to me how come in the space of 2 generations we've gone from one income being enough to fund a house, to fund a car, even a TV, get the kids to school, get all the food you need, everything. How come in 2 generations, despite all the developments in technology, all of the wealth that this country supposedly has underneath it and has been exporting, despite all of that, they need 2 incomes and people are still in debt? How the hell did that happen? Yeah. How did so many women entering the workforce help anybody? Explain that to me. Nobody can. But because I say stuff like this, people accuse me of having an agenda against women. I'll tell you, as an agenda against women, the people who've told them your job is not to be a good mum, and if you stay at home, you're wasting your talents. Fancy telling someone that they're wasting their talents by doing something that people who believe in evolution will tell you they were born to do. Yeah. Fancy doing that. You want to talk about people being misogynistic and destructive to women? It's the people who fill their minds with nonsense from the day they're born. That's the mainstream media. That's our education system, and that's why I've gone off on this little tangent.
Had a rant. Yeah.
I always have my coffee at the start of the show. I'll calm down by about the halfway mark, guys. Trust me.
Yeah. Well, there was another one during the week. There was another article in the Courier Mail along that subject where some young mother had put her child into daycare, and when she came back in the afternoon, the child was dead. And my mother's first reaction was, she shouldn't be home doing whatever. She should have been looking after the child. And I feel very sorry for this mother, but that's the sort of consequence. Yeah, other people are never going to look after your kids as well as you're going to look after them.
Absolutely,
that's just the way it is.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. Very interesting. Yeah. I haven't even heard of that, so it just adds to our argument.
Well, that makes a nice little opportunity to say that we do try. We've been just the last few weeks trying to have a loose central topic for our shows. We started off just talking about this topic or that topic. We're trying to have more of a loose structure. Today, the loose structure was supposed to be money, and I'll talk about money in the Swiss referendum in the international segment. But we're thinking next week we might, to get this all off our chest, because obviously it's building up in us. Yeah. Next week we might make the loose topic, unless anything dramatic happens between now and then, in Ferguson or elsewhere. All going well, we'll spend a lot of time next week talking about the general broad topic of gender equality, second wave feminism, cultural Marxism, the Frankfurt School, you name it, it'll be in there next week, all going well.
Yep, okay. No, that'll be good.
Absolutely. All right, so we better move on because these are 90-minute shows now. The next topic to talk about, we'll get you in the show now, Ethan. You told us before the show that a council has rejected fluoride or something like this.
Yes, just this week, the Southern Downs Regional Council on Wednesday voted to remove fluoride from their town water supplies. So to give a background, on December 4th, 2012, Lawrence Springboard, who was the Minister for Health at the time, made a decision to allow local councils to decide themselves whether they have fluoride within their water supply, which spreads out to their regions. Before that, Anna Bligh, who was the Premier of our state, introduced mandatory fluoridation in 2008 for all local councils, which was just an unprecedented example of state order control at the time. And I remember just the outrage that came when Anna Bligh said, and you can see the photos, which I can link to in the info box, of Anna Bligh signing saying, I am forcing, fluoridation on the people of Queensland. And at the time, it was just absolutely, ridiculous. It was just unbelievable. So, local governments at the time, they had to apply to get an exemption to remove fluoride, with most communities not being eligible to do so through various reasons. So mandatory fluoridation was introduced, even though the people didn't want it, and then councils were almost every time knocked back. But on December 4, 2012, here in Queensland, it was knocked back, and now all councils are eligible to follow in their footsteps. And since then, over a dozen councils, it's continuing to rise, have unmedicated their water of fluoridation. And this is a fantastic achievement because, Queensland has some of the hardest working anti-fluoridation campaigners in this country, in this state. And that's why from 2008 to 2012, they were handing out information, they were lobbying, they were doing everything to try and get mandatory fluoridation abolished so that the people could go to the council and do it. And since then, over a dozen have, and we've also got great politicians such as Liberal member for Nudgee, Jason Woodforth, doing fantastic work in the state, who's been a campaigner for anti-fluoridation and pro-health for a while. Woodworth claimed one time on the Conspiracy Oz podcast with Mick Raven in Australia that over 30 of his LNP colleagues wanted fluoride outlawed and labelled it as a, quote, brain-altering poison. So just fantastic work all around in the state, whether it's political, abolished mandatory fluoridation. And, we can do a special on fluoride in the near future and speak about the obvious and documented dangers. But I thought, most of our listeners will probably be aware for now. And if not, they're certainly more inclined to objectively listen to our information and make their own conclusions than what the mainstream media has been telling them about fluoridation. So it has been abolished, and this decision means that fluoride will be removed from urban water supplies in Warwick, Stanthorpe, Elora and Yangon. I've probably pronounced all of them wrong. Warwick.
Elora. Sorry.
As listeners have seen from my past episodes, I'm not too good at pronouncing anything, and I should not be doing role plays. But the good news is that that's another 35,000 people in these areas that will not have fluoridation. I just thought it was an incredibly positive result, and something that we could finally say was a positive piece of news this week.
Yeah. No, I agree. And I've been told that Palm Island is even thinking about it as well. That's an Aboriginal group. Yeah. So, and I think that's very good too, because from what I can understand, the Aboriginals are more susceptible to the dangers of fluoride than the European population.
Yeah. No, it was just fantastic to see, and I reported on this when it happened in 2012, that mandatory fluoridation has finally been scrapped. Yeah. And just knowing the protesters myself and seeing all of the work that they were doing and how hard they were trying to get this out, and now the councils have been, slowly removing this due to, people holding town forums and getting the information out and debating this. Some really major, hundreds of thousands of people around the state now aren't subjected to, fluoridation. As opposed to where we are, where Campbell Newman, and this is one of the hardest regions, including also the Logan region, to get rid of, because it's just completely hard to get rid of. But the good thing is it's not mandatory anymore, and we do have the choice finally. Now the Southern Downs Regional Council has finally listened to the people and got rid of it, so it's fantastic.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, I'd like to have a general discussion about fluoride, using that as our little segue to do so. Yeah. If you had said to me, I'll be honest here, if you said to me, even just a few years ago, fluoride is bad for you, they shouldn't put it in your water, I probably would have thought that you were an unusual person. I would have thought that you were, one of those people, and because I'd never looked into it. And these days, I never try and tell people not to use fluoride. And if they ask me, I'll give them the honest answer. I try and avoid it. But I never bring it up with people because I know how I was just a few years ago. It's drummed into you that fluoride is good for you.
Yeah.
And what happened for me, like a lot of topics, was the moment that I actually went to do the research, not just go to Wikipedia. Wikipedia is completely compromised. Not just going to Wikipedia. If you ever go to Wikipedia on a contentious issue like this, always go to the talk page. Look at what's being disbarred from being put on the front page. If you notice that scientific studies are being disbarred from the front page, check them out. And the more I looked into scientific studies, actual studies, into the so-called efficacy or whatever, the so-called benefits of fluoridation, and realizing that they were completely over-exaggerated, and then looking at the harms, which are completely understated, it dawned on me, wow, I was in the wrong here. If I had to judge someone for saying they don't like fluoride in the past, well, I was the fool. Because the moment that you spend even 15 or 20 minutes actually looking at the supposed reasons for it, you realize we have been conned.
Yeah. And just recently, the National Health and Medical Research Council, I think that's right, set up an advisory board on this. And what did they do? They stacked the whole thing full of dentists and people from that sort of crew. And I think there might have been one member of the public, if there was one.
Oh, but Lindsay, the dentists don't want people getting cavities. They want to sit in their practices with no customers. What do you think? They have some kind of vested interest in this?
Yes. Oh, anyway, I could get onto that because there are so many kids now with fluorosis, white and black teeth, and that's about $5,000 a pop to get them covered. Yeah. So anyway, I won't. And they'll be very insulted because I've said that. But that's
right. If there's any dentists listening to this podcast right now, get in touch with us. We'll get you on the show, and we will give you 15 minutes. If you're a pro fluoridation dentist, this is an open invitation to any dentists who might be listening now or in the future. By all means, get in touch with us. We will happily have you on the show. We need to have a discussion. If you like, we can make it a one-on-one conversation with myself, Ethan, or Lindsay. If you feel like you're being ganged up on, we'll do it fairly. Let anyone who claims to be in any way qualified to comment on this topic, to tell us that there should be mass fluoridation of the water. Anyone who feels so inclined to think that they've got the rights to say that, come on the show and let's have a discussion and bring all the science that you think that you've got with you, because we'll pick it apart. I'll pick it apart on the spot. Yeah. Please, this is an open invitation.
No, and the thing even to resonate to people is just that you can do it in layman terms as well and say, well, look at toothpaste. It says you do not swallow, danger, do not swallow, but yet this exact same amount is in the water. And people don't even, the amount of people that have told me that it's natural fluoride that comes from the rivers, and it's not. It's from the phosphate industry, hydrofluoric acid, and
but it's cadmium.
Arsenic.
Arsenic. Bang, bang, bang. Yeah, and there's no. The legislation says for 3 different lots of fluoridate, 3 fluoride chemicals can go in there. It says nothing about cadmium and arsenic and all these other things. So to me, that's criminal.
Yeah,
you've got no right to be putting that rubbish in their drinking water.
It's the same as vaccinating kids. If you want your kids vaccinated, vaccinate them. Why does everyone else have to get vaccinated? Because you think it's right. Do you know what I mean? And they'll say, but if your kid doesn't get vaccinated, then my kid's at risk. Hold on, I thought you said you vaccinated your kid. What's the point of vaccinating them if you think that they can still catch the disease just because my kid's in the same classroom? We're not even saying that my kid has the disease and I'm going to put him with your kid. If my kid's sick, I will just keep him at home, right? Yeah. But you're saying that my kid has to be vaccinated because you've bought into the brainwashing that that's what you're supposed to do. It's the same with fluoride. If you want fluoride in your water, buy the fluoridated water. Put the fluoride tablets in the water. If that's what you think is good for you, do it. I feel sorry for your kids, but you have no right to say that my water supply has to be fluoridated because you bought into the brainwashing. That's ridiculous.
No, and we've said before with the vaccines, if my kid is sick, what is the risk? If the vaccines actually work, your kid should be completely protected.
Exactly.
And it's just this whole notion of herd immunity. That no one's immune unless it's in an entire herd. You know what I mean? Everyone has to be vaccinated. Everyone has to have fluorides, so then we can be immune. It's completely rubbish.
I tell you what, when I was doing the research about the front pages of the Courier Mail, and we have to remember the front page for a lot of people is either all they see as they walk past a shop, or because it's a big image with big writing, it leaves an imprint on their mind. That's the whole idea. The front page is very significant. Not just in what the direction it tells you about the newspaper's slant, but actually in its impact on the masses. And when I was doing my research, because I want to do a big thing about the Clive and Putt Palmer thing, that's probably a few weeks away. But when I was doing the research, I did notice that I'd never noticed before. The Courier Mail is running a massive anti-vaxxers are crazy campaign.
Yeah.
And I noticed that on early July, there was a thing saying, shot in the arm, new plans developed to help suburbs that are lagging behind in their vaccination rates. And I won't waste the viewers' time by going through my notes here, but there was another time when they said something similar, again attacking people who don't want to get vaccinated. It's a coordinated mainstream effort to make people believe they have to be fluoridated, they have to get their kids vaccinated, whatever. And if you ram this message through their head enough, the majority are going to go with it. And once you get the majority going with it, most people will go with the majority. So people like us sitting here saying, actually, I don't believe I need fluoride to have healthy teeth. To many people, most of our listeners are probably switched on, but to many people, they would think that we're crazy because we're not going with the masses. And then you look how easy they're manipulated by things like the Courier Mail front page. It all makes sense what's going on here.
Yeah. No, it's blatant. And we, as I said, we can go more in depth into this into a future episode. And I'd love to do that with fluoride especially because that's a topic I'm really versed in. I know you are, Lindsay, and you are too, Johnno. You would be too. Just the overwhelming evidence and overwhelming refute to the mainstream establishment saying that this is good. It's just unbelievable.
I have to say, I know that there are a lot of people out there talking about this, and that's fantastic. It'd be remiss of us to talk about this topic without also mentioning, A, how we came to realise what we realised, and B, what we do about it since we've got the knowledge. Now, we didn't plan on the rundown to spend this much time talking about fluoride, but we might as well. This is an important topic. A, I'll chuck this one to you, Lindsay. Did you ever believe that fluoride was good for you like I used to, or have you always known that that was nonsense?
I can't remember how long ago it was, so I can't really remember. As long as I can remember, I've been against it. Just on the principle that, well, there is no dose. I mean, I can drink 5 or 6 glasses of water a day, or I can drink half a glass of water a day.
Yeah.
And there is, and one of the National Health and Medical Research Council provisos was that they do a background check on all the fluoride so that we know how much background fluoride there is, and they've never ever done that. So anyway, there's so many things, but it's not just that. It's how dare you force me to take a poison?
Yep.
And it doesn't matter how you dress it up. That's 1080. That's what they give rats and they give dingoes and to kill them.
Yep.
So don't give me this rubbish that it's perfectly all right. You'd have to have. I remember in Moree we had a fella up from the health department to give the council the rev up, about putting it in. You'd have to drink a swimming pool full of water a day to get poisoned. Bullshit! It's poison. I don't care.
Yeah.
And when you discuss it with dentists, they only ever want to talk about teeth. They don't want to talk about bones.
Yep.
They don't want to talk about cancer. And there's been plenty of people in America for 50 years saying yes, it causes cancer in everybody.
Yep.
Yeah. So anyway, I won't go on.
No, I mean it's the whole purpose of the show. Is to go on. And when you mentioned the dose thing, that I remember now when I was doing this research because we're going back a few years now. That was a part that stuck out to me was when one of the pro fluoridation, because you always check both sides, right? Even one of the pro sides had said something about the dose that the average person takes, and they showed the mathematics that they've done to work this out. And I was like, hold on a second. I run and I cycle heaps. I drink tons of water. I probably drank 3 or 4 litres a day back at that point. I was like, hold on a second. Even by their own estimations, I'm overdosing on fluoride. Yeah. And it wasn't just that I was overdosing on fluoride. It was that up until that point, I had thought that I thought fluoride was harmless. Yeah. You see what I mean? Not, it's got some harms, but overall it's a benefit. I'd never been taught the other side at all, that there was harm, even according to the people who promote it. And I was sitting there doing the maths, and I was like, even by the people who promote this crap, even by their figures, I have overdosed already today.
Yeah.
And when you have that realization, that changes everything. Yeah. That you weren't even given. If you give people 2 sides and they choose a side, hey, whatever.
Yeah.
But when you don't even give someone the other side of the argument, in fact, you tell them that anyone who believes the other side is crazy, like we were all, I don't know about you, Lindsay, but when we were growing up, that's pretty much what I was told.
Yeah.
I don't mean by my parents specifically, I just mean by society, by television, by school, etc. When you tell someone, hold on, the other side is the domain of crazy, and then you suddenly realise, hold on, the other side are their concerns are entirely legitimate. In fact, I've been overdosing on this crap. Changes everything.
Yeah. Can I make one other point? I had a mate who died recently from cancer, and he was a pretty bright boy, and he investigated this, and he found out that when they give you a needle to do dental work, they've got fluoride in that in a massive amount because that accelerates it. So instead of having to sit there for 6 hours for this stuff to work, it works almost immediately within 20 minutes. So that he was blaming that in part. Now, I don't know whether that's genuine or not, but that was his thing, was these people, whatever you do, and especially at my age, your teeth start to crack. So you find you're having a lot of work done on your mouth. Now, if you're getting, for 3 months or 6 months, every month you're getting needles in you, you're copping a hell of a dose of fluoride. And I don't think most people out there realise just how much they're copping. And it's not just that, it's in fertilisers, it's in sprays on your food, it's in every damn thing.
Yeah, and most importantly in showers as well, it goes through your pores and and for me, waking up was it was a combination of just going down the rabbit hole. It was one of the facets of just the overall control that we have and the suppression, and just meeting people as well, and meeting people explaining it to me, and then doing my own research and thinking, this is unbelievable. And especially because personally, I know you both know that I'm more of a spirituality sort of person personally away from the show. The effects that it has on the pineal gland as well, which is which really concerned me at the time. Which the pineal gland is considered the third eye and whatnot, and just doing this research, it was just baffling. And to see that this medical establishment, just the same as it is with global warming, is a calculated assault, which is funded by an agenda to tell you this when they haven't even done the research themselves. It was just to have the medical establishment and the media behind it. It was just, I couldn't believe it. It was unbelievable. It's poison. We are being medicated on a daily basis. Yeah. Medicated.
And told that it's good for us. And I think the whole process of what some people call waking up, or what I like to call deprogramming, it is a gradual process. There are steps along the way. And I think for a lot of people, realizing that you're being poisoned every day, but not just that. You're being told the poison's good for you. But not just that. You're being told people who don't want the poison are crazy. When that all dawns on you, when that actually sinks in, changes, it opens up a whole lot of doors that you wouldn't have gone through. And then you can start going through more doors on the process of waking up a deprogram, whatever you want to call it. And once you start, there's really no stopping. So if you're listening to this podcast just because someone gave it to you, or you just stumbled on the internet and everything that we just said sounds crazy, you've got two choices now, Buster. You can either go and do your own research and find out what we found out, or you can just turn the podcast off now, go back to Dancing with the Stars, eating your GMO food, drinking your fluoride, because once you realise what's actually being done to you, there'll be no stopping you. You want to learn more, and there's so much more to learn. Yeah. Before we do move on to one of those other topics, though, I do want to make sure that we do give the listeners who this might be new to some solutions here. If the fluoride's in your drinking system, as it is here in Brisbane at the moment in 2014, what do you do to get around it?
It's usually expensive. Well, my experience is an expensive thing. You've got to get reverse osmosis filters and all that sort of stuff. Or, and that's if you want to have a shower. I know a lady who's allergic to it, so she had to do that for a shower, as well as drinking water. I go to the local service station. There's a reverse osmosis system at the service station. I can buy 10 litres of water for $3, and if I buy 20, it's much cheaper again. And I just get that every month or whatever. But I don't know what you people do, but that's how I try to get around it.
What about you, Ethan? What do you do, man?
There's a couple of good companies that sell non-fluoridated water, but then they still have the rest of the crap that's in the water as well. It's hard to get around. There's really no definite solution, like to 100% get clean, proper water, unless you live, where you've got a well that you can get out of to. And when I tasted water from a well for the first time, you know what I mean, that came directly from in the earth, you know what I mean, it was unbelievable.
Almost sounds like a religious experience, doesn't it?
I took a pilgrimage to Sacred Well. But you can notice it so much, and that was when I really started personally campaigning about fluoride, is when I tasted proper water that was just overwhelmingly different from the crap that were being... And in Queensland, when it was introduced, they put too much in it, and too many people got sick originally. That was the problem. And then they had to dose it, but they messed up the entire thing straight off the bat, and there was too much fluoride in the water, and people were getting sick, and people were getting headaches, and straight off the bat they'd done it. But I've noticed through my personal experience that the water from the tap is increasingly getting worse and worse tasting. It's for some reason, and it's just it's crap.
Yeah,
it's crap.
There may be. I know they're putting purifiers in it. Other purifiers, and they've got a tendency to have a taste that comes through as well. Because I think the fluoride, is you can't taste it. But yeah, I don't know any easy way around it. I mean, if you've got plenty of money, you can.
What about you, Johnno?
Well, as you guys know, we don't plan to be commercial with this show. This is just a bunch of guys getting together and talking, so I don't want to promote any specific brands, but there are brands out there. There are water purifiers you can buy. They are expensive, unfortunately. Like I'm talking $300.
Yeah.
Mine is in transit right now.
Okay.
Because my housemate had a water purifier from this particular brand, and I was skeptical at first, but I loved the water that came out. Now, you have to trust, they put on their website that it was independently tested by this group or that group, and it came back with these results. How can you know? Even if it is a mass-selling brand, the fact is that you know that the water had fluoride added to it. You can't know that the filter took it out of it. But this particular brand, it comes with the two different filters, like the charcoal one to get rid of the normal stuff, and then a specific fluoride filter. All you can do is hope that is getting rid of the fluoride like it says it is. And like I said, it's a few $100s. And mine is in the mail at the moment. In the meantime, just down at the shops, not from where I live, there is a big machine that sits there in the car park where you can put a few dollars in and it spits out 15 or 20 litres of water. So I walk down there twice a week, perhaps, with my big plastic containers for water. Now, I know you don't want plastic in you, but I would take plastic over fluoride. That's how much I detest the stuff now. So I walk down there, and then I fill up the two 10-litre containers and walk back home. It's a good workout. My shoulders are getting complimented by everybody. In fact, that was the one thing that stopped me from ordering the $300 water filter thing. I was like, no, this is forcing me to walk down to the shops. It's a really good workout. I think even when my Berkey arrives in the mail, I'll still try and do that more often. It's a good workout. Yeah. And so, those are your options. If you live near a shopping centre that has one of those devices that spits out the defluoridated water, that's one option. Another option is to buy one of these devices that cost a few $100, but hopefully you're trying... Look, if it's a choice between $300 in your pocket and no fluoride or much less fluoride, and fluoride and $300 in your pocket, the only kind of person who would choose the $300 is someone who's had too much fluoride. They've got no hope. But I tell you what, guys, we spent way more time on that than I planned, so we better move on to the next topic now. After the good news about fluoride being banned in a council, or the council got rid of it, we're going to move on to something that's probably a little bit less fun, and that is the shooting that took place here in Queensland. Now, again, we have many listeners who are international. Queensland is the third biggest state here in Australia. National population, 24 million. Queensland's population is, I think, about 5 million. So it's a big place. Brisbane's the biggest city. And we've had a number of shootings lately, and you wanted to touch on one of them. Yeah.
I've just got a piece of the newspaper in front of me. I'll just read a couple of sections. This was from the 26th of November, so that's not very long ago. The Queensland Police Commissioner, Ian Stewart, ordered the review of police policy, procedures and training yesterday after 3 fatal shootings by officers in a week. He said the review might draw on the expertise of overseas police and the Australian Defence Force. And then down below, Mr. Stewart said there would be an internal review of procedures and police would look for international best practice by speaking to experts, including those who were familiar with the use of force model. Yeah, that's all I've got there. I've got at the top of the page, I wrote in when I was thinking about this, what percentage of police shootings, killings, are found to be criminal? And I might try and investigate that and just see over time, 10 years or whatever, and just see how many of them actually were prosecuted or whatever.
Some of our new listeners are saying, is that newspaper rustling I can hear in the background? Yeah, Lindsay always comes in with the ripped out newspaper things. It's a very endearing feature of yours. And I can see you've got another one there with some pink highlighter this time.
Yeah. This is about to do with domestic violence, so I can come back to that.
Look, we do want to do that topic about feminism and all the related topics. This whole violence against the women propaganda that's just being forced down people's throat at the moment deserves our full attention in next week's episode.
Yeah, that's right.
Just going back to that shooting, though, you did say before the show today, we always discuss what we want to talk about, that you see some interesting contrasts between that police shooting and the one that happened a few weeks ago, where basically a guy drove towards the police, instead of jumping out of the way, which you would think they would do, one of them or both of them just drew their guns and shot the guy, shot him dead. Yeah. And a lot of people say, well, he was driving towards the police. They had every right to shoot him. Okay, contrast that with the reaction that's taking place overseas to do with certain police shootings. And isn't it funny how the media will instantly take the police side in one country, but in a kind of similar incident on the other side of the planet, the mainstream media is taking a very different tack.
That was the first thing I seen when I saw the first thing I thought about when I saw these shootings was the relation that it does have to what's happening in Ferguson right now. And, you know, I could go off for an hour, but I'll only touch on it really quickly. How when you actually read the court and the court transcripts and the testimonies from the witnesses and whatnot, and you see that no, Mike Brown wasn't on his, didn't have his hands up, he was actually charging at the officer, and et cetera, et cetera. The officer then acted, in my opinion, negligently and didn't do his, he had so many other options to do instead of shooting him dead. But it's the exact same thing as what's happened with these shootings in Queensland. People have come at them with knives, people have come at them with this. Situations that they are trained to combat, and most police do wear, stab-proof vests and everything because they are supposed to be prepared for this. It's the exact same thing that's happened, yet over in the United States, you can see how the media can influence people, and it goes back to the media, because over here, nothing has happened, but over there is a social engineering experiment happening over there with to do this. And I could go on for ages, but I just want people to look at the contrast, because if people do want to get angry about Ferguson, if people disagree with me and think that, I'm saying the wrong things about Ferguson, if you're so angry about that and you would join in the protests over there, why are we not protesting over here? It's because the media hasn't told us we're supposed to protest over here. Yeah. The media did that over there, and it's the exact same thing that's happened here, except it's happened 3 times. And I just thought that was the first thing that came to my mind when I saw it. It was really interesting to, just analyse the similarities between it and how the media goes back to it.
And then the question, Ethan, is what do you think is the agenda at play over in the US, where they are using the mainstream media to whip certain people up into a frenzy? What do you think the agenda is?
It's difficult to look at. It's obviously dividing the people is one of the main ones. Dividing the people with this, going back to race and colour, and that it was a black boy that got shot and this white officer. I've seen headlines this week that said, white officer, not going to trial over death of black child. All of this is ridiculous. Divide and conquer, but not just that. It's to show how the mainstream media and how the establishment can get people in a frenzy as an experiment. Because all of these protesters, the majority of them that I've seen through my research, do not know the story at all, have not read the transcripts, are going off of what people prior to them have said. And when you follow the path back, it goes to what the media has said. And it's this large social experiment where people are getting angry, and they genuinely think in their hearts, just like the climate change issue. Many protesters genuinely think they're helping the planet through this thing. But when you go right back to it, it's serving the agenda. And the same thing's happening here in Ferguson over in the United States. The same thing is happening.
Yes. I agree with you, and I'll refer back to, I don't know whether people listening will have seen it, but there was a YouTube video, I think it was YouTube, anyway, a video of a young Negro man from Ferguson, and that was his complaint, was that we're being flooded by outside people who are coming in to the protests, and we're scared that we're going to draw the heat down on all of us who live here. And I remember thinking at the time, that's a bit sus, isn't it? Something's not right there.
And don't get me wrong, I'm not justifying the actions of it was completely negligent. And the Queensland Police, they've said that they don't have any problems with their training, but it's obvious that they've got tasers and pepper spray and all of these self-defense techniques that they could deal with the situation more. But just going back to the contrast, and I could talk about Ferguson forever because it's really something that's been getting on my nerves this week. Yeah. Just the blatant social experimenting by the mainstream media and the hype up and the way that they calculated the announcement at a certain time and the way they planted the seeds beforehand. But
am I right? Is my recollection right that they announced the verdicts or they announced the judgment on the Friday evening? Rather like at night time, which is just encouraging any response. It almost seems as though if you believe that's a coincidence, a Friday night announcement, there must be something wrong with it. I mean, how obvious is it what they're trying to do here? They're trying to stir up a race riot, essentially. And the question is, like I put to Ethan before, Lindsay, why are they trying to do it? It was like you said a few weeks ago. The people at the top never do things for one reason. They always get 2 or 3 reasons at the one time. The divide and conquer is the obvious one. Keep the black people hating white people. Keep the white people feeling defensive that the black people are blaming them for all of their problems, etc. But also, if you can actually stir up an LA type riot, like if you can stir up a really big one, who are you going to call in to fix it?
Yeah, that's right. And as we've seen, militarised police. Ferguson's turned into a war zone, it looks like, and now all destruction, buildings being burnt to the ground. You've seen that many of these are either plants or provocateurs that have been in there, and they've actually been local gangs and local citizens defending the buildings from these people. Well, that's not being reported by the mainstream media, but everything is just everything for a reason. As you said, it's multiple things at the same time.
Make people think that they need big authoritarian police to protect them. And they're doing that in the US and Ferguson right now, is my opinion, by trying to stir up a race riot. Hey, look who you need to protect you. In Australia, it's, at the moment, at least in Queensland, it's kind of the opposite. It's, hey, look, the people who are dying at the police's hands, that's their fault.
Yeah, that's right.
Because they're in the process of ramping up their gear. And I saw a thing to get back, because we haven't got to international segment. Yeah, that was my fault for kind of throwing, but, sometimes we do blur the topics. There's nothing wrong with that. I did see in the news just a couple of days ago, Australia's biggest or second biggest ever drug bust. Supposedly, like $1 billion, some ridiculous figure worth of drugs. Because they always take the street value as in, if you took this entire amount and sold it at like a gram a pop, how much would you make from it? You know what I mean? So they always overinflate how much it's worth. But what I did see was the photos that were in the mainstream media of this, bikie gang, whoever was caught. What were all the police dressed as? The full tactical gear with balaclavas, automatic long guns, the whole lot of it. And only a few years ago, you'd say, hold on, okay, good. I don't. If you believe it's good that they're using their resources to do drug busts, okay. But you'd say, why is that? Why are these police officers dressed like that? That's pretty scary. Yeah. But over time, they've managed to condition us. They're trying to condition us to think that this is okay. That they're a big 6 foot whatever policeman rolling around, completely covered, almost like in chainmail. But the modern gear. Yeah. Semi-automatic, possibly full automatic, I don't even know. Wearing balaclava, it's scary shit. And they had the photo of this guy sitting down handcuffed, but they've got the police standing over him. What message do you think they're trying to send there?
And you mentioned that, Lindsay, the evolution of seen that you were outraged that a policeman was holding a gun or had a gun on him. And now militarisation police has become the norm.
Yeah, and that's what the point I was going to come back to with this was that during the week there's been in the letters to the editor there's been a running commentary back and forward, and I'd say the majority of people were very pro-police. These they've got a right to defend themselves against these idiots or whatever. Whereas in fact most of them, the idiots, were had problems, mental problems. But my thing, I hark back and think, well, what did they do 30, 40 years ago when they didn't have guns on their hips? What did they do then? Did they go in with a waddy and belt this bloke so that, or how did they handle it then? And my other thing was that one of them got shot because he had a steel bar and he was 20 feet away or something. And my thought was, if I had somebody and I shot him twice because he had a steel bar 20 feet away from me, I would have to go to court and explain myself how I was defending myself before a jury. Yep. Now, these people don't seem to have any of that. That's why I'm saying, how many of them have ever been prosecuted? Yep. I really think there's something's not right.
Would I be right in inferring that your letter to the editor didn't get published?
No. I don't write because they never publish anything I write. So I gave up long ago. I know they and I've had personal disagreements with some of the journalists. So I know I actually was going to take a legal action against one of them, so they will have black band.
And it'd be interesting if you were to run like your own little independent study. How many pro-state, pro-establishment letters do you have to write before one gets published? How many anti-police brutality or anti-government power do you have to write to get published? And see the ratio. It'd probably be in the dozens to one, possibly the hundreds to one. I would imagine. Just write a letter saying, I think it's good that the police have guns. Don't you know the ISIS are out to get them? We need the police to keep us safe. They're doing a tough job. Anyone who says otherwise just doesn't know how tough it is to be a cop. Signed, damn fool of St. Lucia. Bang, you're in. Anything that goes the other way, forget about it.
No, I've got a mate who thinks along much the same lines as me, but when he writes his letters, he seems to be able to restrain himself more than me. And so he has a sort of a middle of the road and just a little bit of a dig, and he sometimes gets a letter in. But I know it's obviously I know I'm never going to get a letter in the paper, so I don't even bother now.
Well, the whole topic of the militarisation of the police, we have touched on it, especially leading up to G20, bit by bit. I did want to throw in that thing about that drug bust because even me, someone who's been following the Bearcats that are being launched from state. Every state now has a Bearcat, if memory serves me. One of those armoured personnel carriers. Even someone like me who looks for this stuff was going, hold on a second. This is worse than even I've seen, and it's immediately after G20, and the police state isn't going away. And you look at what happened in Canada, where that fake false flag shooting, of course, it was of a soldier. A couple of days before that, the fake, hit and run was of soldiers. In Australia, that fake stabbing, the Newman Hayter one down in southeast Melbourne, of course, he was trying to hurt police. Why? To further justify arming and protecting and funding the police, because look, there are all these people out to get them. And anyone who looks into any of these events will see it's all complete nonsense.
Well, one of the things that I quoted before about this, the Commissioner saying that he said the review might draw on expertise from overseas police. And that straight away, that struck me. I thought, they're going to have certain police over there in America or Israel or whoever who are used to beating up demonstrators come and show them how to do it and what more equipment they need and all that. That's my view of it. But anyway, having said that, it's not just the shootings. I can remember here last year or the year before, there were a number of young fellas pulled over in Ipswich and the police had them lying prone on the ground and a car came and ran over them. Now, the police have to be responsible for the death of those boys. I never heard anything else come of that.
I've never even heard of that story, but I don't doubt it for a second. That wouldn't surprise me one bit.
Well, just the other day there was this fellow who was in a wheelchair, and they were punching hell out of him. Do you remember that? They accused his girlfriend of stealing a couple of bottles of grog from the supermarket, and here they were thumping hell out of the bloke on the ground.
Oh, that one, I'll link to that one for listeners who aren't familiar. I'll link. You have to see that one to understand it. Yeah. Because my view, having watched that one, that was I think in Brisbane maybe 2 weeks ago. Yeah. My opinion, having watched that one, was that the security were right in using physical force against the guy. But then there's footage of one of them punching him. Yeah. Like at first, I was watching this going, nah, there is police brutality. I don't think this is it. Holy crap! Then you see what he's saying. Whoa. There's no excuse for that. But I'll link to that one so viewers can make up their own mind. Now, before we move on to the next topic, any final thoughts on that one, Ethan?
No.
All right, now we do have to move on. You've been keeping us updated right from episode 1 of the Australian Roundtable podcast of this so-called anti-terror legislation that our government is passing, supposedly justified by this AEST terror threat. I understand you've got another little update for us about this as well today.
Yeah, well, I'll try to keep this quick because time's of the essence, as Johnno would say. But as I've mentioned, we're in the final wave of anti-terrorism legislation with the data retention debates, and it's still ongoing, debating and everything. But something happened during the debates on Thursday night that really, really got on my nerves, and it was, I'll get into it, but it really it just undermined everything. And I'll speak on my comments, but on Thursday night, our Attorney General, Senator George Brandis, refused to answer the Australian Greens questions about the latest lot of Australian counter-terrorism laws in the Australian Senate. Now, for the people, just to get a context for how important this is, the Attorney General for Australia is the first law officer of the Crown, the chief law officer of the Commonwealth of Australia, and a minister of the Crown. So it's he's the very first law officer.
Yeah.
So when these debates are happening with legislation that affects all of our lives, this draconian, terrible legislation, he has to be the one there to explain this to us. And on Thursday night, he just completely refused to answer questions. Senator Penny Wright from the Greens asked how certain terminologies have been redefined in the redrafted explanatory memorandum as it's being edited and trying to get sent off. And Brandis just refused to answer the questions and even had a personal conversation with a colleague while he was being asked further questions. Now, I'll leave a link to this in the info box, a video of this happening, but they are being asked, he's being asked questions, and it's just silent, and everyone's looking at Brandis. Senator Brandis, do you want to take? No. And then the senator starts speaking again to ask another question, and Brandis goes, no, you can't talk twice, and starts playing, and then starts having a conversation, and the people are saying, hang on, you might need to repeat that question to Brandis. He was having his own conversation. And it infuriated me so much because, and this is the comment I wrote, I said, this is absolute garbage behaviour by the Attorney General. He has continuously delayed discussion, lacked clarity, and dismissed legitimate concerns raised by multiple senators during these debates, and now he just refuses to answer questions altogether. All throughout these debates, he is, he's changed the topic, he's refused to give clear definitions. Now he's just straight up sitting there with one of the most important ones, the final wave, and is just refusing to answer questions. And I said, stand up Australia, our country, our civil liberties, fundamental rights, futures and parliamentary processes are all being stripped away on a daily basis. And this display of carelessness by Senator Brandis is appalling and should not be accepted a day longer. And Alex McKinnon, who's the former editor of the Star Observer, who many people will know who Alex McKinnon is, said in an article something along the same lines. He said, Brandis's attitude is generally frightening. Laws that give security agencies the power to deprive people of their rights and operate overseas, even when they might be overwhelmingly necessary, deserve rigorous oversight and clarity so they aren't abused. At the very least, people deserve to know what's in laws like that before they come into effect. We now have anti-terrorism legislation on the books that Australia's most senior lawmaker either can't or won't explain the purpose and effects of. Now, speaking on Brandis, because I had to throw this in because this is just really infuriated me. Just his blatant,
I can see that.
His disregard for this is, and I've been following this, so it's sort of a personal thing to me. Our legislation that's come in that can say we can be imprisoned and, whistleblowers are suppressed, journalists are suppressed, intelligence agencies can monitor the internet, data retention now.
Don't forget that they can search your house if you're not home and not issue a search warrant for 12 months. Don't forget that little factoid. Every time I come home, I just go, nah, not this time.
But Ben Grubb from the Sydney Morning Herald, who's a good writer for the Sydney Morning Herald, wrote an article called George Brandis Hides His Metadata. And the Attorney General George Brandis wants your private phone and internet metadata to be accessible by law enforcement agencies without a warrant, but won't let you see his. As the Abbott government moves to make its requirement for internet and phone providers to store every Australian citizen's metadata for 2 years, Mr. Brandis has refused to divulge the metadata of his own mobile phone bill. Instead, a redacted version, not even showing the cost of his bill, has been released. It shows his Telstra bill for July is 17 pages long, 13 pages longer than this author's bill for the same month. According to Mr. Brandis' chief of staff, the decision to entirely censor the bill, and you see, I'll link to the article, you can see the phone bill is completely covered out. It's like a freedom of information request almost. It censors the bill was due to it containing, quote, personal information about a number of individuals' telephone numbers, unquote. So the hypocrisy with this is that he wants to get all of ours, but, oh no, I don't want to divulge the information for mine because it has people's telephone numbers in there. Well, look what you're trying to do with us.
No, but he's important. And you're not. You haven't got the message yet.
It's it just infuriated me so much. Yeah. And then George Brandis is just making me absolutely sick every time I'm seeing him in these debates. And Ludlam stood up, Senator Ludlam, who is one of the key...
You are a closet Greens supporter, aren't you?
Yeah, I love the Greens. Well, in terms of these anti-terrorism debates, it doesn't matter who's been supporting. The only people that have been is the Greens that have been actually asking questions about this, and Ludlam stood up and said, why are you refusing to answer? These are legitimate questions. You need to answer these. You need to answer. And Brandis, no. And you can't do that. This is ridiculous. Why are we letting this get away? Why are we letting our lawmakers get away with this?
The cynic in me, and look, Ethan, I fully understand all of your frustration. I detest Brandis and the rest of the Liberal Party and the Labor Party and the Greens. They're all part of an establishment that's taking every single person who's listening to this right now in Australia to a very dark place sooner than most people realise. So I fully understand all your frustration. I guess the cynic in me says, would you rather Brandis get up there and give a bullshit answer that doesn't address the question, just like all of the other ministers do? I mean, really, he's just saving us the time. He's just saying, I'm not going to answer this question, and that's it. Whereas most people get up there and waffle for 5 minutes about how the other side are just as bad because they're hypocritical, blah, blah, blah. Brandis is just saying, hey, you can't touch me.
Well,
Next question.
Yeah, well, Brandis basically doesn't even know what metadata is. It's been proven in interviews that he's had. He's been interviewed, and I'll link to that interview in the description.
Is it that he doesn't know what metadata is, or is it that the whole political system relies on the masses thinking that they're incompetent, and they would sooner have the masses think they're incompetent than realize that they're conniving and they're working towards an end agenda? I mean, the average person actually thinks the politician, they think they're overpaid and that they tax them too much, but they actually think the average politician is stupid and that the political parties are incompetent and make lots of mistakes. And that's what they want to think. They don't want to think there are smarter people than them taking us to a bad place. if I were George Brandis and I knew exactly what I was doing, allowing intelligence agencies to trace every single thing you do electronically, I would probably want the masses at home to think that I'm some old fogey who just is overstepping because I don't know what I'm doing. That's probably what I'd want the people to think. I wouldn't want them to realize that I'm an evil, conniving, slimy scumbag who knows exactly what I'm doing, and I'm gonna do it anyway. I wouldn't want them to know that. I'd probably play the fool. And now I'm not saying that's necessarily the case with Brandis. That's my suspicion, when we can disagree on that. But I think this guy does know what metadata is. I think his advisors know what metadata is. I think the people above them with the strings, playing little puppet masters, know exactly what they're doing. We're in Stasi Germany right now. They know exactly what. We didn't get to Stasi Germany through incompetence, people. We got here through our government passing these legislations, doing it in a parliament or in a senate, where people are asking questions and they can say, I'm not answering. Yeah. What are you going to do about it? Seriously, what are you going to do? Vote the other side in? They're going to do the same thing, you idiots. It doesn't matter. I'm taking my paycheck. I'm getting $300,000 a year. If you guys vote me out, guess what? I want a pension for the rest of my life. So what are you going to do about it? Ask your stupid questions. Write your letters to the editor. You people aren't going to do shit so long as you keep going to your job, paying your taxes, watching your Dancing with the Stars. You ain't doing nothing. So come at me. Yeah. That's what I think.
Yeah, no, it's a fantastic point, and that could very well be the case. But the thing is going back to, people should be more, uproared about the fact that he's not answering in terms of if he is putting on a show and he was answering it incompetently on purpose. Now that he's not answering it at all, the people have been so manipulated and so trained to not care about politics at all that that's not even a factor in their head.
Oh, mate, they care about politics. They care about Jackie Lambie looking like Rambo taking up the front page of their newspaper. I mean, that's the situation we're in right now. Even the people who think they're in... The Victorian state election was yesterday. Now, obviously, I grew up in Victoria. Victoria is our second largest state, population about 6 million. They had their state election yesterday. I'll probably talk about it a little bit next week. There's too much to talk about today. But basically, the government that was just voted in again last night ended their last term 4 years ago. And during that term, they signed the state up on a 25 or a 30-year unbreakable contract to have to pay close to $1 billion a year for a desalination plant that doesn't produce any water, has never produced any water, is probably never going to produce any water, but the Victorian taxpayer is going to be paying almost $1 billion a year now for the next 25 to 30 years. They also spent a couple $1 billion on a ticketing system called Mikey that was originally supposed to cost a couple $100 million, could have been bought off the shelf from Perth on the other side of the country. Instead, they contracted it out. What happens? It costs a couple $1 billion. They should never have been voted in again for the rest of their existence. They got voted in again yesterday. Two major parties are the same, and the Lemmings are going to keep voting them in time and time again. And the Greens are going to sit there saying, we don't like that, whatever. The Greens are part of the problem. They're not fixing anything. They're not campaigning on the issues that matter. They're campaigning on cultural Marxist issues and occasionally asking questions in the Senate that don't get answered, as if that makes a difference.
I agree with you entirely. I go back to my old the Elders of Zion. Because that's exactly what they've. That's exactly what they said. We'll just have them so that it doesn't matter who they vote for, they won't get anything different, and they'll just get sick of it, and they'll just go away.
Yep.
And that's exactly what you've just described to me.
Yeah, and that's what's happening to Ethan right now. Ethan has been following this issue so closely. He's been our resident expert on the legislation. If anyone's interested, 3 tranches now of legislation have been passed. 3 of them. And I think there's one more that's before Parliament. My figures might be wrong. Ethan can correct me. The point is, every single one of these is draconian. You want to hear about them, go back to episodes 1, 2, 3, 4. Ethan's broken these things down in detail. Every single one of them's scary. Ethan's been following this one closely, and now he's sitting there watching his Attorney General just refuse to answer even the most basic questions. Who can blame anyone for getting disenchanted by this system?
Well, it didn't affect me in terms of me not believing that he wasn't a puppet politician. It was that the people of Australia have been so pacified to accept this, to not even accept that he's giving crappy details of everything and just completely, getting rid of questions and refusing to follow the parliamentary process. Now he's just flat out not doing anything, and the people are not concerned about that. Yeah. Where the show that's on display now doesn't even have to be commence. You know what I mean? Yeah. You may as well go to a theatre and nothing comes on now because they're not even pretending like that this is real anymore. Yeah. And that was the most discouraging thing for me.
So they must be close. They must feel cocky that they're getting close to.
You should see Brandis' stupid head in. All right, I'll stop there.
Yeah, there you go, people. George Brandis. I should say as well, the studio that we use is a room at one of our apartments here. We have to close the window so you can't hear the crows in the background. It does get warm in here sometimes, and when you're talking about scumbags like George Brandis and his political party and all of the scum who support them, whether as paid employees or just peasant supporters who cheer their side on every 3 or 4 years, who can blame anyone for occasionally wanting to just... I mean, what was it? Was it H.L. Mencken who said, and I'm going to paraphrase here, any decent man must, at some point or another, just want to lift up and start slitting throats. And, hey, I'm a very non-violent person, as anyone who knows me knows, but the more that you see of what they're doing, and again, even our listeners, we have so many listeners who are so up to date on what's going on. They don't just listen to us, they do their own research, etc. If you're not in Australia, if you're not following what's happening, if you haven't... Look, I've got a list in front of me from July of the propaganda on the front page of our newspapers. If you don't know the full frontal assault that's happened to make people let these legislation, you don't know what's coming. Like, unless you're looking at it in front of you, like I am right now, you don't know that... It's hard to understand that there's an agenda at play and that it's in a rush, Lindsay, like you said. I like to think that I can see where this is going. I hope I'm wrong, by the way, but it looks pretty clear to me where this is headed, and it's not a long way away what they've got planned. Yeah. I think, Ethan, you would agree, whether we agree or disagree about, certain aspects of it, the bigger picture, we can probably both agree that this is headed somewhere very quickly. Lindsay, you've seen this coming like a freight train for a long time. You'd agree as well, it's ramping up in speed. Yeah. I mean, again, I don't promote violence and I never will promote violence, but if someone like H.L. Mencken, a person much smarter than me, says, hey, even good men occasionally want to find people like George Brandis. Hey, who am I to say that we don't occasionally feel like some people deserve things every now and then? But you know what? That's enough about Brandis. We're already an hour and 10 into the show. I've got a few minutes now to talk about the Swiss referendum. Now, Lindsay, this is one of your topics because you're a little bit, in the same way that Ethan is a little bit of a closet Green supporter, I think you're a little bit of a closet gold bug. Am I right?
No, I'm not actually. No, I'm not. No. I don't touch gold because when they took the gold away in 1933, that sort of burnt me, and I thought, no, these you talk about the crooks and scumbags. These crooks will. If I buy gold, I'm a little bit worried that they're going to pull the same stunt again later. So no, I don't touch gold.
And if you did have gold, you'd say on air, look, I wouldn't buy gold.
Oh, well, I suppose that's true too. But you can tell the genuineness from my voice,
Yeah, absolutely. Well, look, do you want to give the background? Because people are going to have to listen to me talk for 10 minutes. Do you want to give the background about the Swiss Gold Referendum that's taking place today?
Yeah. I haven't got any details in front of me. The details from a few weeks ago I left at home. But basically, they want, I think it's 20%, is it? Something like that, of the central bank reserve in Switzerland to be held in gold bullion. And I think it's, I just can't remember the exact figures, but like 300 tonne or something like that anyway, that they'd have to go out and buy over the next 5 or 6 years. And the bullion dealers and the people who are so-called experts on this seem to believe that would cause a bit of an earthquake in the gold market. And I've spoken before about silver, that was going to come the same thing in China. They're using it so much on solar panels and computers and phones and things that they only had enough till the end of November as well. So there's liable to be a bit of an earthquake with silver as well when they run out. They're going to, if they can't just close down their factories, they're going to have to get the supply, and the only way to get that is to spend more money on it. So one would think that the price would go up. But then something the other day, there was 80 tonne of paper gold was dropped on the market in 15 minutes. And of course, it just, the market just dropped again. And I was looking this morning, gold and silver both dropped this morning again. So, somebody's really playing with it, and I don't know who it is. People keep saying, oh, it's JP Morgan, and then others saying, no, that'll be China because China's trying to get gold, and it'll be punting on paper gold so they can claim real gold later at the current price. And so I don't know enough about it to comment on that, but yeah, obviously something's going on.
Well, I know you have been looking forward to the Swiss Gold Referendum because this is a significant event for everyone in the Western world, and probably the entire world. This is developed a very wealthy nation going to the polls today to decide, do they want their central bank to be mandated to have a certain amount of gold in their safes to essentially back up the money that's printed. Now, some people might say, well, don't they already have that? No, most countries don't have anything like that at all. All of the money that you have in your wallet, the currency that you have, is backed by nothing other than your government's ability to tax you. And in fact, most of the money in your bank doesn't even exist as currency. So you've got this big thing called money. Your house is worth $300,000, $400,000, $600,000, right? You add up all the houses, or you add up all the mortgages for the houses, and you've got this big thing called money. But actual currency, the dollars and notes, well, just make it even simpler. Your bank account. You might have $10,000 in your bank account, but all your neighbours might have $5,000. I mean, this. I live in St. Lucia. Maybe that's actually plausible. In most of Australia, it's nothing like that. But let's pretend, for argument's sake, you live in a community. Everyone has money in the bank. There's not actual currency sitting in the bank. If even a sizable fraction of people went to get their currency, the bank wouldn't have enough. Just it's as simple as that. It's what we call fractional reserve banking. Now, at least if you have some gold backing the money, in theory, the amount of money that's in the system is backed by something. But in most countries, it's backed by literally nothing other than a future promise to tax the people. So what they're doing in Switzerland is they're having a referendum because, as you noted a few weeks ago, Lindsay, they can get a referendum done if they get enough signatures.
Yep.
In Australia, the majority of us could be against war, but we're still not going to stop war. We can't stop it. We can't do it. We can't even really. I mean, we've said enough about that. But in Switzerland, they can have a referendum, and so they're having one today on the 30th of November 2014. Are we going to force our central bank to back our money with just a bit of gold? I think 20% of their total reserves will have to be gold. They'll also be banned from selling gold into the future, and there's some other clause, but those are the main ones. Yeah. And there's not a hope in hell that that's going to be allowed to pass, even if 70%, even if 70% of Swiss vote yes, there's not a hope in hell that that one gets passed. Because if it did, the ramifications would be greater than even I can fathom, let alone the person who doesn't follow any of this. I mean, it's just not going to happen. But it does provide a good little indication of how the people at the top, using their mainstream media, don't want us to even think about this. And I remember at the time, I don't know about you guys, but I used to think, the education system, if only we reformed it. There's just a few topics that they're not spending enough time on. But and then, of course, you realise the education system isn't there to make people... Like, that is the opposite of what it exists for. Because if it existed for good purpose, people would know about money. They'd know about the basics of money. They know what fractional reserve banking is. They know how it started, etc., etc. So, and I'm not going to get into a big talk about all of that today because it's really stuff that you have to study for yourself. And it is complex at first, but eventually you get your head around it. But it's best done on your own, using the resources that are available on the internet to teach yourself about money. What I want to talk about is how in Australia, the fact that there is a gold referendum taking place in Switzerland, a very significant event, has got almost no attention, and the attention it's got has been complete crap. So let me just spend a bit of time now talking about an article that I saw from a couple of days ago. This is from the Sydney Morning Herald, SMH, the Fairfax publication down there in Sydney. The headline is Swiss Gold Referendum Makes Little Sense, Citi Argues, from November 28. This is a quote. A Swiss referendum on Sunday that could compel the nation's central bank to hold 20% of its assets as gold makes no sense, Citi argues. If the referendum passes, Switzerland's gold reserves would effectively become worthless and greatly increase economic risk for the tiny European nation, the US investment bank said in a note entitled Gold, a 6,000-year bubble revisited. At present, said Citi, the SNB holds 1,040 metric tons of gold and would need to purchase at least another 1,700 tons by 2019 to meet the threshold. But a research paper from Citi has criticised all three aspects of the referendum, end quote. Now, the writer then goes on to quote, almost without interjection, large passages of the report's claims that the Swiss people stand to lose out heavily if they pass the initiative. And then the writer, his name's Cauchy, then says that this is all academic because polls show the no vote is well ahead. And then he finishes the article with this, quote, the Citi notes author, global chief economist Willem Butler, apologies for pronunciation there, takes a shot at gold bugs in his conclusion. Even though I view gold as a pure bubble, that bubble may well be good for another 6,000 years. Its value may go from US 1,200 per ounce to US 1,500, or US 5,000 for all I know, he says. Investing a vast amount of money in something whose value is based on nothing more than a set of self-confirming beliefs will make for an exciting ride. Whether that is enough to impose it as a requirement on one central bank is another matter. End quote. Now remember, there hasn't been much coverage in the mainstream media in Australia of this significant referendum. And this is what I could find, right? What I just read out to you. Now, some of our listeners may not be following economics or finance as closely as some of us do, and that's fine. And they might be wondering why I find it hilarious that claptrap that I just quoted got printed in our daily newspapers as though it's informative. Listen to what that guy said. Gold's value is based on nothing more than a set of self-confirming beliefs. Gold has been valued for thousands of years. Okay, and now compare that to how long we have valued, for instance, US Treasury bonds or tech stocks. Even the dollar sitting in someone's wallet right now as they listen to this is only valuable insofar as somebody else has self-confirming beliefs about it, which history and mathematics tell us won't last much longer. They won't. But he's trying to say that gold is worthless. Those are his words. Anyway, I have to go on. He even had the cheek to say that gold is a bubble that might last another 6,000 years. Well, if it lasts even a fraction of that time, it isn't a bubble, is it? This is classic doublespeak, what we're listening to right here. You have to really admire the cheek of these people. No, your nation should not require its banks to secure your wealth with a worthless thing like gold. After all, its value is dependent on others valuing it, and it could be a bubble. Best to keep your wealth secured by things like mortgage-backed securities, financial derivatives, and good old trusty fiat currency. They never go out of favour. That's what this guy is saying. That's what this guy is saying there. Anyway, this goes deeper than just the blatant pro-establishment propaganda being peddled by our mainstream media, though. Look at the source, Citigroup. That was a report that they got from Citigroup. Now, who was Citigroup? Well, the GFC, the global financial crisis, is obviously a complex topic, especially at first. And I highly recommend our listeners go and check out the 2010 documentary Inside Job. Yes, it won an Academy Award. Yes, it's narrated by Matt Damon. But apart from that, it's a terrific expose of what happened during the GFC and what didn't happen afterwards, namely criminal prosecutions. Got an awesome soundtrack. It's really well edited. It's easy to follow, even if you think money is complex, even if you think finance is complex. And to an extent it is, because it's not taught in school. This is a terrific documentary. I highly recommend. Set aside 2 hours, watch Inside Job 2010. Again, the link will be on the description box. However, the basics of the GSC are fairly straightforward, and we did say we were going to talk about money this episode, so if we go 5 or 10 minutes overboard, please, listeners, forgive us. The basics of the GFC are pretty straightforward, so let me just give you a really quick summary, and to those who do follow this closely, apologies that this is a bit of an oversimplification, but this is the basics. US house prices had been rising for years and were clearly in a bubble leading up to 2006. A number of large institutions sought to profit from securitizing and trading the mortgage debts. Securitizing, in other words, is just taking lots of people's mortgages, bundling them together, and then selling them on to other firms packaged with a nice rating from a ratings agency, who's in on the take, you see. But this is all dependent on the price rises of those securities, the mortgages, rising, or at least staying stable. Around 2006-07, there was a slump in the economy and in house prices. So many mortgagees couldn't pay back their loans, so the securities, those big mortgage packages, began to lose value, and suddenly over-leveraged firms were in trouble. And they needed to shore up credit to cover their positions, and with lots of large organizations simultaneously in need of credit, there was a liquidity problem or a credit crunch. This in turn led to a number of the big financial firms being in trouble, and this led to what we call a financial crisis, which has never really left us to this day. No. 7 years on. I remember as a young man following this, and who would have thought that 7 years later, the economy, this was a financial crisis that led to an economic problem. The finance and economy, they're related, but they're distinct. This was a financial crisis that is still hurting the economy to this day. Who would have thought that 7 years ago? Anyway, these large firms were too big to fail and ended up with balance sheets that were full of junk. Okay, their assets now weren't worth anything. Many of their assets were worth nothing, but they had all of these debts. Of course, if you have more debts than you have assets, you're insolvent. So they had to go to the government to get bailouts, which is literally the government giving them money to shore up their assets, the asset side of their ledger. And this essentially led to the Federal Reserve printing presses running overtime to inject money into the zombie financial system that's still with us today. The GFC hit its zenith on September 15, 2008, when Lehman Brothers filed for bankruptcy. And I'll get to that in just a moment. But guys, that's the basics of the GFC, okay? Yes, that's oversimplified, but that's basically how it all went down. It's not, at the heart of it, it's not that complicated. People were taking big risks with the mortgages of regular people, packaging them up, selling them, knowing full well that if and when the bubble popped, other people would be picking it up. It's as simple as that.
But I don't even think it was just ordinary people. I think they were purposely selling them to people on pensions.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
That's why they call it the subprime crisis, because, look, there were changes in regulations leading up to this where they were giving loans to people who shouldn't have had the loans in the first place. You're quite right.
Yeah.
And I wanted to keep it simple. No. I'm glad you made that interjection, because people don't want to just listen to me.
Yeah.
You're quite right. So people were even being lent money when it was known they probably wouldn't be able to pay it back because, hey, their asset price, their house price was rising. Yeah. So you see, even at the foundation of where those you're quite right, Lindsay, at the foundation of where those mortgages came from, it was never going to last. And these guys knew that. That's essentially what the GFC was. And hey, Matt Damon has a much sexier voice than me. Listen to Inside Job 2010, fantastic film. Now, the reason why I gave that is because I want to talk about Citigroup. Remember that propaganda that I read out from the Sydney Morning Herald was from Citigroup? Well, who is Citigroup? Let's look at an article from the New York Times from 2008. This is headlined, Citigroup saw no red flags, even as it made bolder bets. November 22, 2008. Quote, today, Citigroup, once the nation's largest and mightiest financial institution, has been brought to its knees by more than $65 billion with a B in losses, write-downs for troubled assets, and charges to account for future losses. Citigroup's stock has plummeted to its lowest price in more than a decade, closing Friday at $3.77. At that price, the company is worth just $20.5 billion, down from $244 billion 2 years ago, so down 90%. End quote. Now, if you read the article in full, you'll see that this mob was at the heart of the GFC scandal themselves, the same story as the other two big-to-fail firms. The top executives were making risky bets because they made their commissions and bonuses in the short term, knowing that somebody else would have to pick up the pieces in the long term. And they made millions and millions of dollars cash, these guys, knowing full well that eventually the music would stop and there weren't enough chairs for everyone. They knew that full well. And you'd better believe they got away with it. And I'll get to that in a moment. But first, to show you who picks up the pieces when these kinds of houses of cards built by these scumbags fall down, here is another article from late 2008. And this is from the Wall Street Journal. The title is, US agrees to rescue struggling Citigroup, November 28, 2008. Quote, after a weekend of marathon talks between Citigroup executives and top federal officials, the parties late Sunday night nailed down a package in which the government will help protect Citigroup from its riskiest assets. Under the plan, Citigroup and the government have identified a pool of about $306 billion with a B dollars in troubled assets. Citigroup will absorb the first $29 billion in losses in that portfolio. After that, 3 government agencies, the Treasury Department, the Federal Reserve, and the Federal Deposit Insurance Corp, will take on any additional losses. The plan would essentially put the government in the position of insuring a slice of Citigroup's balance sheet. That means taxpayers will be on the hook if Citigroup's massive portfolios of mortgage, credit cards, commercial real estate, and big corporate loans continue to sour. In addition, the Treasury Department also will inject $20 billion of fresh capital into Citigroup. That's $20 billion of fresh capital into Citigroup. That comes on top of the $25 billion infusion that Citigroup recently received as part of the broader US banking industry bailout. End quote. So, and this is me talking now, that's $45 billion with a B dollars of direct money straight from the taxpayer, just like that. And then close to $300 billion with a B in what is essentially a government or taxpayer guarantee to cover the losses of those dodgy investments. And that's just one company. And I've focused today on Citigroup because of their relevance to... But that's just one group. They apparently are reputable enough to get their anti-sound money propaganda plastered across our mainstream media here, almost verbatim, in Australia. But they were one of the many companies who were involved in this entire scam. And here's the best part. I'll also link in the description box for readers to read this themselves to a Huffington Post article from last year which had the headline. This is the headline, quote, not one top Wall Street executive has been convicted of criminal charges related to the 2008 crisis. Read the article for yourself, okay? That's what these people did. This is just one group, Citigroup. $45 billion with a B dollars of direct government money, taxpayer money, plus the insurance of $300 billion. Okay? Either of those things is horrible. But that was both at the same time for one company of many. Now, even as laws evolve in Britain, this is a quote from that Huffington Post. Okay, it gets better. This is a quote from that Huffington Post article. Even as laws evolve in Britain, the government wants to criminalise recklessness in banking. A repeat of the global financial crisis and near collapses of 2008 would not necessarily result in many more prosecutions today, lawyers say. End quote. So this is an article from last year saying, hey, if the same thing happened again, we probably couldn't prosecute anyone now either. So you see the laws were bad. They were abused, taken advantage of. The laws haven't changed, guys. The laws aren't going to change. You have to work out who's really running the show, and it's not your politicians, okay? We'll get some more of that another day. So these guys, Citigroup, made millions of dollars taking risks that the taxpayer would have to cover for. They weren't imprisoned. The companies didn't go bankrupt or out of business. Most of them didn't go out of business. They were just giving government money. Instead, here we are a few years later in Australia being fed their propaganda in our daily newspapers in articles that don't make any mention of any of this. Yes. None. No mention. And it gets even better. The Citigroup author the Citigroup author who was cited by the Sydney Morning Herald claims that gold is a bubble. Remember that? Well, guess what Citi did at the height of the global financial crisis? This is a Reuters article from September 2007. Remember, Lehman Brothers collapsed a year later. So the peak of it was another year later. This is an article from September 1, 2007. This is a Reuters article. Quote, Ameriquest Mortgage Co., the largest US subprime lender, as recently as 2005, is closing the latest home loan provider to shut down amid the nation's housing market slump. Citigroup Inc., the largest US bank, said on Friday it agreed to buy the wholesale mortgage lending and payment collection assets of Ameriquest parent, AWST Capital Holdings, for an undisclosed price. The acquisition includes the right to collect payments on or service $45 billion of loans. Jeffrey Perlowitz, New York-based Citigroup's head of global securitized markets, said in a statement the transaction allows Citigroup to secure valuable and scalable platforms in a market undergoing significant change. End quote. So let me recap all of this for listeners, and thank you so much for your patience for listening to this. Our mainstream media mentions almost nothing of the Swiss Gold Referendum. And when they do mention it, they publish almost verbatim anti-sound money propaganda by a mob known as Citigroup. They don't mention that Citigroup was one of the largest basket cases of the global financial crisis, or that it required billions upon billions of dollars of taxpayers' money in a bailout. The kicker is that the propaganda includes calling gold a bubble when these scumbags bought into subprime loans even after the loans had started to go bad. You can't make this shit up.
No.
And when I wrote this originally, I had intended to be a lot more comical. I'd intended to throw a lot of jokes in there and be, jocular about it. And you should do that because it makes it a lot easier. A spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down. So I do apologise if that came across a little bit cynical or negative. But people have to understand this didn't just happen. I mean, firstly, most people don't even realise it happened. Look, it happened. You have to understand exactly what happened. But then you have to realise, do your own research. You realise not only could it happen again, they're setting it up to happen again. Yeah. And we've already taken our interest rates. The United States has already taken the interest rates down to zero. The European Central Bank has taken its interest rates down to zero. In Japan, interest rates have been down at zero for 20 years. In terms of monetary policy, they've already fired the best shot in the gun. So what's the next shot? Well, it's quantitative easing. What's that? That's printing money. That's almost literally printing money, just creating it out of thin air and giving it to commercial banks to try and get it out there. It didn't even happen up until relatively recently. It was thought crazy. But now that's their only solution because they've already used the interest rates that don't work. Now they're using quantitative easing. What do you think happens when the quantitative easing doesn't work? Okay, what do you think happens? Now, I did also put together, because I thought we were going to dedicate the show to money, so I did put together also a little thing outlining the background of when we had gold reserves, then the Bretton Woods Agreement, then the 1971 Nixon shock. If you go all the way back to Maynard Keynes, John Maynard Keynes, the architect of the Bretton Woods system, and you look at what he said about how he preferred a single currency for the world and how his plan was for the opposite of a gold standard. When you read what these guys wrote, the guys who were really calling the shots back in the day, then you look at what's happening today. You look at who's making money off the current system and how they're setting themselves up for a collapse. Guys, this isn't just a matter of interest. Yeah. This isn't just a matter of trying to understand the world for understanding the world's sake. People have to start to realize that if they don't do their own research and don't start to look out for themselves and their family and their communities, you're letting yourself and your family and your community down. Because what's coming is actually kind of clear if you do your research. You don't need to speculate about what's coming. They've got plans, and the plans aren't good for you. They're not good for me. They're not good for your friends and family. And even though you can't stop, maybe you can't on your own stop what's coming, you can plan for it. Not just in the physical sense, not just in terms of how you allow your assets or your debts or these things. I mean, even in a spiritual and psychological sense. Because when things go bad, people who aren't mentally prepared for it, they're the first ones to do stupid shit. Well, don't be one of those people. Get yourself ready for what's coming. I don't know if it's coming in 6 months, Ethan. I don't know if it's coming in 5 years. But the more research I do, the more clear it becomes. It is coming. And that gives me time to pause and to consider it. And we will wrap up the show soon, but after everything that I've just said and listeners having to listen to my voice for 15 minutes, I'd love to get your opinions, guys, on this topic specifically and the more broader question of what I've been touching on.
Okay. Well, when I was sitting here and she was saying that, I was thinking to myself, it was only a short while ago in this broadcast, we were talking about how the women have got to go to work, we need 2 incomes to buy a house. You know, we went on and on and on about that. And I thought, well, that's exactly what you're talking about. This is how it affects you. In the end, I mean, it's not just America. We're not isolated. Our banks are in debt to the American banks and all that. And it comes down to the fact that we're being taxed out of existence. More fuel, new fuel tax in Australia, electricity going through the roof, water going through the roof. Everything's got to be privatised. And we're wearing the cost of it. And it's just so that these people can make a lot of money for their incompetence. And anyway, logic tells you that if you subsidise incompetence, you're going to get more incompetence. And that's exactly what they're getting there.
Or it won't be incompetent at all, and people will know exactly what they're doing, but they'll know that they'll get away with it. And what's fascinating is if you watch that documentary, Inside Job, and again, that's not going to tell you everything you need to know, okay, but it's an excellent primer. You'll find out this isn't just a few bad executives at the big banks and a few bad executives at the ratings agencies and a few government politicians who've been paid off. It's even on the Inside Job coverage of this, you'll see it goes even deeper into academia. Okay, this goes into, what do I mean academia? I mean there are people who are being paid to be professors and to give their opinions to the general public or to lobby groups or whatever, who are on the take of the very companies who profit from all of this madness. They know exactly what they're doing. They suspect they're going to get away with it, and up until now they have done. I disagree with this notion that it's incompetence. Sure, if you dangle a carrot in front of a few managers or executives' heads, sure, they're going to take it and be useful idiots. But they're still just being useful idiots for someone above. Yeah. And those people above know exactly what they're doing, and they're ramping it up. We're getting there very, very closely. What do you think, Ed?
Yeah, it's completely by design.
Absolutely.
It was completely by design, and the exact same the exact same road that led to the financial crisis is being done again. The exact same thing is done again. The bubble, they're making the bubble again for it to burst. Yeah. And we've spoken about people around our age nowadays that are being encouraged to go, buy a house and buy this and do that. And no, it's not. And this system's going to run out. This system it's mathematically been proven that it's not going to last forever. There's no way it can last forever. And they want to talk about gold. Oh, it'll just last another 6,000 years. It's just a bubble. No. You think that this is what? Because in the last 100, 200 years of this fake debt system, that really increased in the last 100 years of paper money that's not represented at all, this debt money out of thin air. You think that this is how society's supposed to be?
Yeah, and that's the thing. People aren't taught in schools, and they're not told by television for a good reason, that the Federal Reserve Act came into being in 1913, just before the World War. They're not told that the IRS came into existence at the same time with the 16th Amendment. They're not told that. You might go, oh, that's America, why would I care? Well, in Australia, we got our central bank a couple of years after them. Not by coincidence, I would suggest. They don't know that in the early 1930s, the United States passed executive orders and even actual acts of legislation banning the ownership of gold, saying you have to turn your gold in at threat of imprisonment for, I think it was 10 years or $20,000 of their money, which is an incredible amount of money today. They were forced to hand over their gold. Yeah. They don't know that in the Bretton Woods Agreement, countries were supposed to peg their dollar so that $35 equaled a certain amount of gold. They don't know that in 1971, the Nixon shock was Nixon saying, actually, we're going to temporarily suspend the convertibility of the dollar. And there was nothing temporary about it. They were taking themselves off the gold standard because they'd printed too many dollars. And remember, everybody, you get paid in dollars, okay? You can't be paid in anything else. If you try and set up your own monetary system, even not counterfeiting the money of your country, if you say, hey, I don't like it that my money gets worth less every year because they're printing so much of it, I'm going to have my own monetary system, you can be imprisoned for that. The central bank has a monopoly on the right to issue money. So anyone who tells you, oh, I believe in the free market, I think we should deregulate, I want a free market, ask them if they believe in a free market of money. They'll say no, because they've been brainwashed to believe that it's somehow possible to have a free market where there's a monopoly on the creation of money, the very thing that's used to measure every single thing else in that so-called free market. Yeah. And I used to believe in all of that crap, okay? I know how easy it is to be brainwashed by the commerce faculty of university and by accounting professors and whatever. And to just believe that banks should be allowed to create money out of nothing. That they should get paid a return on risk when they're creating money out of thin air in the first place. That you need a central bank. I used to believe all of that crap, okay? And I'm sure some of our listeners are saying, well, hold on, guys, this isn't hard to work out if you put the time into it. And I strongly recommend that you do, if not to save the world, to try and give yourself some time to prepare, because once you look into it, you'll see exactly what's coming. And it's not good for you. It's not good for your family. It's not good for your friends. It's good for a very small group of people, most of whom you'll never even know exist, let alone know the names of. Yeah. Now, I'd love to talk about this all day. I will say on that topic, anyone who's sitting at home in Australia saying, well, that's America. They had their GFC. We got out of it unharmed. Oh, boy. Look, just quickly, in 2008, when Lehman Brothers collapsed, like I said, there was a zenith of the whole thing. Our banks almost ran out of money. Okay, and that's not conspiracy theory. The facts of that were even published in The Australian a couple of years later. A couple of years later for a good reason. Yeah. Our banks almost collapsed. In fact, 2 of our banks had to borrow money from the US Federal Reserve, the same as they were bailing out all of their banks. They kind of mini bailed out our banks. Now, I bet you didn't know about that. Guess what? I didn't know that until I started looking into this, okay? And once I started, I never stopped, and that's why I sound like a raving lunatic now, because it's fascinating stuff. It's far more interesting than Game of Thrones or Dancing with the Stars. That stuff might be entertaining or interesting, but you know what's really entertaining and interesting? What's actually happening. The truth. Far more interesting, and it's all there to be accessed. Again, the links will all be available in the info box underneath the show on YouTube. Now, we've already gone over time by 10 minutes, guys. I do apologise if you had somewhere to be. We'd best move on to our final thoughts. Lindsay, you've been quiet over there, mate. Any final thoughts before we sign off?
No, not really. There are a number of topics, but we'll gradually deal with those over the coming weeks. Nothing at the moment.
Yep. You just want to get home and make sure your gold's still there.
I wish.
I'll just look forward to get home and get into my room with all my Greens posters and my Scott Bubbling posters on the wall. No final thoughts. Thank you to everyone that has tuned in and for the continued support as always. That's my final thoughts. I think we've covered everything pretty well today. Fantastic. Look, I've got a few things I want to get through really quickly. Firstly, we've got our website up. That's Oz Roundtable, AUSRoundtable.com. We've been saying in all of our episodes, hey, just check the links, we provide them. But it's hard to fit them all in the info box under the videos. So I've gone back, I've made a page for every one of our videos. Every single thing that I've said, hey, check out the links. The link's there for you to do your own research. And like I always say, don't look, I trust Ethan, but you shouldn't. And I trust me, but you shouldn't. You should be verifying everything we say. So we provide the links, and you can verify it for yourself. Go check out ozroundtable.com. All of our episodes are there. They'll be there in the future. Another point I want to make is that if you're listening to this live, fantastic. What we're going to have to start doing is, because we upload these shows as their own individual things with the intro music overlaid and the noise reduction done, what's happening is, because we're leaving our live show up, in the first 24 hours, we're getting over 100 people who listen to it and comment on that. When actually what we want is for people to watch and comment on the official upload. So what we're going to be doing as of this episode 8, November 30, is as soon as the live show is finished, we're going to be putting it to unlisted, so you can only access it with links. And then we'll have the official episode up for you to listen to by the next day, which is the one that we prefer. If you are listening on a Tuesday or a Wednesday and you do see that both are there, please go to the official one. We try not to cannibalize our own audience and have half commenting on one and commenting on the other. Let's get everyone commenting on the official one. And you know that it's the official podcast because, Ethan, you name it Australian Roundtable. Podcast episode 7. And you can see that it has our logo in between it and everything, and it's the official upload. And on our feed, the live episodes are not in the feed on the YouTube channel. So if you click youtube.com/Australian Roundtable, you won't see the live videos there.
Excellent. Okay, I've got a couple more things to touch on really quickly. I know that the guys of We'll Do It Live and Mash Resistance and some of their affiliated people have been working for a long time now on a massive expose about Sandy Hook. And at the moment you can find the flyers called We Have to Talk About Sandy Hook. If you're not familiar with what I'm talking about, please just YouTube We Have to Talk About Sandy Hook. It's going to be a terrific video of just the parts that I've seen already. It looks incredible. And Sandy Hook was one of the things that helped me wake up to the fact that we're being lied to. If you're not familiar with Sandy Hook and the blatant lies that were told about that, you need to check this out. Like I said, YouTube, We Need to Talk About Sandy Hook. I'll have the links in the info box, as always. And of course, on Tuesday night, there is the Match Resistance Roundtable with up north of the 49th and Brian Roberts. On the Wednesday night, this is American time, you've got the Red Pill Revolution, Free Radio Revolution. We'll do it live show. Get behind these people. They're doing the same thing that we do, but they're doing it in Canada and America respectively. The more of us who are doing it, the better, which leads to my final point. Guys, like we said last week, the more of us who are doing this show, the better. I'm listening to lots of podcasts now. There are lots of people doing this, but a lot of them are focusing on this topic or that topic. I love people who just talk about media lies, media deception, false flags, have a bit of a laugh about it. If we can do it, you can do it. So please, if you want any advice, just get in touch with us. Australian, AusRoundtable.com, our Gmail address is there. Get in touch with us, we'll support you. The support for us has been immense. I can't get over how many people are sending positive emails and positive YouTube comments and all the rest of it. It really is fantastic. Keep that stuff coming. You've made my day. You guys can do the same thing as well. Make your own show. I want to comment on your shows. I want to say fantastic work, guys. Can't wait to tune in. It's a good feeling. Let's build a community, guys, because what we need right now is a community. That's it from me. So thanks to all the listeners. We went over time by 15 minutes. I do appreciate your patience. Thank you so much, Lindsay, for coming in.
That's right. It's my pleasure.
And Ethan, thanks again for all your good work, mate.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.